August 9, 1936. 4:22 a.m. NYPD Captain William Dodge cuffed Stephanie St. Clair in front of her Harlem neighbors, smiling like he'd finally caught the queen. 14 hours later, he walked into his precinct and handed in his badge. No explanation. This is why. August 9, 1936. 4:22 a.m. The knock came like a fist through silence. Stephanie St. Clair was already awake. She'd been awake since 3:47 a.m., sitting at her mahogany desk in the second-floor study of her brownstone at 409 Edgecombe Avenue, Sugar Hill, Harlem. A single desk lamp cast long shadows across the room. 3 manila envelopes sat in front of her, sealed and addressed. She'd been expecting this moment for 8 weeks. The second knock was louder. More insistent. NYPD. Open the door. Stephanie didn't move. She looked at the envelopes one last time. Samuel Leibovitz, ESQ Wilfred A. Roberts, Amsterdam News. The third had no name, just an address in Lower Manhattan. She slid them into the top drawer of her desk, locked it, and placed the key in the inside pocket of her silk robe. Then she stood, straightened her posture, and walked downstairs. Through the frosted glass of her front door, she could see shadows. 6 men. Maybe 7. All wearing the dark blue uniforms of the New York Police Department. She recognized the shape in front, tall, broad-shouldered, fedora tilted back. Captain William Dodge. 135th Street Precinct. 42 years old. On Dutch Schultz's payroll for the past 3 years, even after Dutch died. Now he worked for whoever paid. Stephanie unlocked the door and opened it. Mississippi St. Clair, Dodge said, smiling. It wasn't a kind smile. We have a warrant for your arrest. She didn't ask to see it. She knew it didn't matter. Fabricated charges, bought judge, no real evidence. Just another attempt to break the numbers queen. She'd seen this play before. So had Dodge. But this time he thought he'd finally won. On what charge? Stephanie's voice was calm. Measured. Her Martinique accent barely audible after 24 years in Harlem. Operating an illegal gambling enterprise. Conspiracy. Racketeering. Dodge stepped closer, still smiling. You're coming with us. Stephanie looked past him at the other officers. Young men mostly. Faces she didn't recognize. Probably brought in from other precincts specifically for this. Dodge knew better than to use officers from the 135th who might hesitate. Who might remember the Christmas envelopes Stephanie sent to police widows. Who might remember she paid for Officer McCarthy's daughter's surgery last year when the department wouldn't. May I dress? Stephanie asked. You got 5 minutes. She turned and walked back upstairs. 2 officers followed her, protocol they claimed. Really, they wanted to search her bedroom, look for evidence, find the ledgers everyone knew she kept. They wouldn't find anything. Stephanie St. Clair didn't keep records where police could reach them. She dressed slowly. Burgundy wool skirt. Cream blouse. Her good coat, the one with the fur collar. Pearl necklace. Leather gloves. If she was going to be arrested, Harlem would see her walk out with dignity. When she came back downstairs, Dodge was waiting in her foyer, hands on his belt, rocking back on his heels like a man who'd just won a bet. Let's go, Queenie. He said it loud enough for the neighbors to hear. By now, lights were on in every brownstone on the block. Faces in windows. Mrs. Patterson across the street. The Johnsons next door. The young couple from Martinique who'd arrived last month. Stephanie had paid their first month's rent. Dodge grabbed her arm. Rough. Harder than necessary. Hands behind your back. Stephanie complied. The handcuffs clicked tight. Too tight. Deliberately. She didn't flinch. Captain William Dodge, she said quietly, just loud enough for him to hear. Badge number 2847. August 9, 1936. 4:37 a.m. Dodge's smile faltered. Just for a second. What are you, writing a report? He laughed, but it sounded hollow. Stephanie didn't answer. She was memorizing. The faces of every officer. Their badge numbers. Who touched her. Who looked away. Who smirked. Details mattered. Details always mattered. They walked her to the patrol wagon parked at the curb, a black Ford with barred windows. Neighbors watched from their stoops now, some in bathrobes, some fully dressed. Word spread fast in Harlem. As Dodge pushed her toward the wagon, he leaned close. You should have paid, Queenie. All you had to do was pay. Stephanie turned her head slightly. Looked him directly in the eyes. I don't pay extortionists, she said. I bury them. Dodge's face went hard. He shoved her into the wagon and slammed the door. Through the barred window, Stephanie watched her neighborhood disappear as the wagon rolled south down HANDCUFF Avenue. The sun was just starting to rise over Harlem. It was going to be a long day. For Captain Dodge, it would be the longest day of his life. He just didn't know it yet. To understand why Captain William Dodge hated Stephanie St. Clair enough to fabricate charges and risk his career, you have to understand what she represented. She was everything the system said shouldn't exist. A black woman, a Caribbean immigrant, a millionaire. And she didn't bow. Stephanie St. Clair arrived in New York City on March 14, 1912. She was 26 years old, carried one suitcase, and had exactly $10 in her pocket. She'd left Martinique with nothing but her intelligence and a refusal to be ruled by men who thought her skin and her gender made her less. Harlem in 1912 was a neighborhood in transition. Black families from the South were arriving by the thousands, fleeing Jim Crow and lynching, looking for work and dignity. Stephanie found both. She worked as a seamstress, a housekeeper, a clerk. She saved every penny. She watched. She learned. And she noticed something the white world didn't. Harlem had its own economy. Underground. Invisible. Resilient. By 1922, Stephanie had found her opening, the numbers racket. It was simple. Elegant. 3 digits, 000 to 999. Players bet on which combination would appear in the next day's published financial figures. Stock market closings, horse race totals, treasury balance reports. Odds were 1,000 to 1. Payouts were 600 to 1. The house kept the rest. White gangsters called it policy. Harlem called it hope. Because in a neighborhood where black men earned $7 a week doing backbreaking labor for white bosses who called them boys, the numbers offered something rare, a chance. Bet a nickel, win $30. Bet a quarter, win $150. Enough to pay rent. Buy medicine. Send a child to school. Stephanie didn't invent the numbers. But she perfected it. By 1925, she controlled 40% of Harlem's numbers operations. By 1928, 70%. By 1936, the morning Captain Dodge arrested her, Stephanie St. Clair's empire generated approximately $250,000 per month. In the middle of the Great Depression. In a neighborhood where most families survived on $60 per month. She employed over 400 people. Runners who collected bets. Clerks who tracked results. Enforcers who protected her operations, not with violence first but with presence. Bumpy Johnson, who'd later become a legend himself, started as one of her runners in 1932. He called her, the smartest person I ever met. He wasn't exaggerating. But Stephanie's genius wasn't just mathematical. It was strategic. She knew something white gangsters didn't. In Harlem, loyalty wasn't bought. It was earned. Her runners made 15% of every dollar they collected. No skimming, no cheating, no shorting them on payday. In a world where black workers were expendable, Stephanie St. Clair paid fair wages. On time. Every time. When a runner's child got sick, Stephanie paid the hospital bill. When a family couldn't make rent, an envelope appeared under their door. When the police arrested one of her people on trumped-up charges, Stephanie hired the best lawyers in New York. White lawyers, Jewish lawyers, men who didn't care about skin color if the money was green and the cause was just. Every Sunday she sat in the third row of Abyssinian Baptist Church. She wore her best clothes. She donated generously. And she made sure Harlem knew, if you worked for Stephanie St. Clair, you had protection, respect, dignity. In return, her people would die before betraying her. That loyalty was worth more than guns. But Stephanie had another weapon even more powerful than loyalty: information. She knew everything. Her network stretched into every corner of Harlem and beyond. She had informants in the NYPD, not cops on her payroll but clerks, secretaries, janitors who heard things and remembered them. She had contacts in City Hall, in the district attorney's office, in the courts. She knew which judges took bribes, which prosecutors had mistresses, which politicians owed money to the wrong people. And she kept files. Alphabetized. Cross-referenced. Photographs. Bank records. Witness statements. All stored in places the police would never find. Her brownstone at 409 HANDCUFF Avenue wasn't just a home. It was a fortress of information. 3 telephone lines, 1 listed, 2 unlisted. A locked filing cabinet in her study. A safe hidden behind a false wall in the basement. And a memory sharper than any ledger. Stephanie St. Clair didn't need to threaten people. She just needed them to know she could. Which brings us back to Captain William Dodge. Dodge wasn't special. He was typical. In 1934, after Prohibition ended and bootlegging money dried up, Corrupt NYPD officers needed a new revenue stream. They found it in Harlem. The numbers racket was pulling in millions. All they had to do was demand a cut. They called it protection money. Stephanie called it extortion. Every numbers operator in Harlem paid 30% to the cops, 10% to Tammany Hall, another 10% to whichever mob family claimed the territory that week. It was the cost of doing business. Except Stephanie refused. In February 1935, Captain Dodge walked into her office at 409 Edgecombe Avenue. He didn't knock. He sat down uninvited. And he told her the new terms: $3,000 per month, cash, delivered to the 135th Street precinct every first Friday. Stephanie looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "No." Dodge laughed. "You don't understand. This isn't a negotiation." "You're right," Stephanie said. "It's not." She opened her desk drawer. Dodge tensed, probably expecting a gun. Instead, she pulled out a photograph. It showed Dodge standing outside a warehouse on Lenox Avenue, shaking hands with Vincent Call, one of Dutch Schultz's enforcers. The date stamp read November 8, 1934. "I have 12 more," Stephanie said quietly. "And bank records showing deposits into your account that match the dates of every major numbers raid in Harlem for the past 2 years. If I make one phone call, the Amsterdam News runs this story tomorrow. Front page." Dodge's face went white. "You're bluffing." Stephanie picked up her telephone. Started dialing. Dodge stood up fast, knocking his chair over. "You can't threaten a police officer." "I'm not threatening you, Captain. I'm educating you." She hung up the phone without finishing the dial. "You can arrest me. You can raid my operations. You can try to shut me down. But the moment you do, every file I have on you, and every corrupt cop in the 135th Street precinct goes public. And you won't just lose your job. You'll lose your freedom." Dodge stared at her. Hating her. Fearing her. "You think you're untouchable, Queenie?" "No," Stephanie said. "I think I'm prepared." For 18 months after that meeting, Dodge tried everything. Surveillance. Informants. Raids that somehow always happened after Stephanie had moved her operations. He arrested her runners, she bailed them out within hours. He threatened her suppliers, she found new ones. He spread rumors that she was cooperating with the feds. Harlem laughed at him. Every move he made, Stephanie was 3 steps ahead. Because she'd been playing this game since 1912. And Captain William Dodge was just another man who thought a black woman couldn't outsmart him. By August 1936, Dodge was desperate. His superiors were asking why he hadn't shut down the biggest numbers operation in Harlem. His mob contacts were asking why Stephanie St. Clair still refused to pay. And his pride, that fragile, dangerous thing, was telling him he needed to break her. Publicly. Humiliatingly. So he fabricated charges. Found a judge who'd sign anything. And planned a dawn arrest that would put Stephanie St. Clair in handcuffs in front of her neighbors. He thought it would be his victory. He thought wrong. Because while Captain Dodge spent 18 months trying to catch Stephanie St. Clair, she spent 18 months building the case that would destroy him. And on August 9, 1936, at 4:22 a.m., when those handcuffs clicked shut on her wrists, the trap she'd been building for over a year was already set. Dodge just didn't see it yet. The holding cell at the 135th Street precinct smelled like sweat, old coffee, and desperation. Stephanie sat on the wooden bench, back straight, hands folded in her lap. The handcuffs had left red marks on her wrists. She didn't rub them. Didn't give the officers watching through the bars the satisfaction. 5:47 a.m. She'd been there 25 minutes. She'd be there much longer. Through the barred window high on the wall, she could see dawn breaking over Harlem. Gray light filtering through. Somewhere out there, her runners were waking up, preparing for the morning collections. They'd hear about her arrest within the hour. They'd know what to do. She'd planned for this. She'd planned for everything. Well. The queen in her castle. Officer Dennis Rourke stood outside the cell, nightstick tapping against the bars. 28 years old. Badge number 3192. Stephanie had seen him before, one of Dodge's loyal men. The kind who enjoyed the power more than the paycheck. "You comfortable in there, Queenie?" Rourke grinned. "Better get used to it. Captain says you're going away for a long time." Stephanie didn't respond. Didn't even look at him. Rourke's grin faded. "I'm talking to you." Silence. "Hey." He slammed the nightstick against the bars. The sound echoed through the cell block. "You think you're special? You think being a woman's gonna save you?" Stephanie finally looked up. Met his eyes. Held them. Rourke looked away first. "Yeah, that's what I thought. he muttered, walking away. But his voice was quieter now, uncertain. Stephanie went back to waiting. 8:15 a.m. Still no lawyer. No phone call. No charges formally read. This was deliberate. Dodge was trying to break her psychologically before the legal process even started. Keep her isolated. Scare. Make her think she was alone. It was a good strategy. It wouldn't work. Because Stephanie St. Clair had been preparing for this exact moment since June 12, 1936. 8 weeks ago. 8 weeks earlier, June 12, 1936, 9:30 p.m. Stephanie sat in her study at 409 Edgecombe Avenue, reviewing the week's numbers. A quiet knock at the door. She looked up. Come in. Marcus Webb stepped inside. 41 years old. Worked as a clerk at the 135th Street precinct. Not a cop, just a clerk who filed reports, answered phones, emptied trash cans. The kind of person nobody paid attention to. Which made him invaluable. Mississippi St. Clair. He was nervous. Always nervous. I heard something today. Stephanie closed her ledger. Sit. Webb sat. Twisted his hat in his hands. Captain Dodge was talking to Lieutenant Morrison. They were in the captain's office. Door was closed, but I was filing reports in the next room. The walls thin. What did they say? Dodge said he's done playing games. Said he's going to arrest you soon. Fabricate charges if he has to. Make it public. Make it humiliating. He said. Webb hesitated. Say it. He said, I'm going to put that black bitch in handcuffs and walk her out in front of all of Harlem. Then we'll see how untouchable she is. Stephanie's expression didn't change. But inside something clicked into place. When? He didn't say. But soon. He's been meeting with Judge Harlow. Getting a warrant signed. Stephanie stood. Walked to her filing cabinet. Pulled out a folder labeled Dodge W. Captain. It was already 3 inches thick. Thank you, Marcus. You'll find an envelope under your usual brick tomorrow morning. Webb nodded and left. Stephanie opened the folder. Photographs. Bank records. Witness statements. She'd been collecting evidence on Captain Dodge for 2 years. But now she needed to move faster. If Dodge was planning a public arrest, she'd turn it into his public execution. June 15, 1936, 2 p.m. Stephanie met Samuel Leibovitz at a cafe on 125th Street. Leibovitz was 52 years old, one of the best defense attorneys in New York. Jewish. Brilliant. Unafraid. He defended the Scottsboro boys. He didn't scare easily. Samuel. Stephanie slid a manila envelope across the table. Leibovitz opened it. His eyebrows rose as he flipped through the contents. Photographs of Dodge with known criminals. Bank deposit records. Affidavits from 5 Harlem residents detailing false arrests, planted evidence, extortion demands. Where did you get all this? Does it matter? Legally? Yes. Practically? He smiled. No. Captain Dodge is going to arrest me soon. Fabricated charges. I need you ready. The moment I call, you file for immediate release. Habeas corpus. Constitutional violations. And you leak this, she tapped the envelope, to every newspaper in New York. Leibovitz studied her. You're not trying to avoid arrest. You're weaponizing it. Captain Dodge wants to humiliate me in public. I'm going to let him try. Stephanie's voice was calm. Cold. And then I'm going to destroy him. Leibovitz closed the envelope. I'll be ready. June 18, 1936, 11 a.m. Stephanie walked into the offices of the New York Amsterdam News on 7th Avenue. Wilfred Adolphus Roberts, the editor, looked up from his desk. Stephanie. Always a pleasure. I need a favor, Wilfred. Roberts leaned back in his chair. The Amsterdam News was Harlem's most influential black newspaper. It had exposed police corruption before. Would do it again. Stephanie placed a second envelope on his desk. Captain William Dodge. 135th Street Precinct. Corrupt. Violent. On the take. Everything you need is in there. Sources, documents, photographs. I want you to write the story. But don't publish it yet. When? I'll call you. When I do, you run it the next day. Front page. Above the fold. Roberts opened the envelope. Scanned the contents. Let out a low whistle. This could end his career. That's the idea. When should I expect your call? Stephanie smiled. Then. Sure. Soon. Back to August 9, 1936, 12:30 p.m. Stephanie was still in the holding cell. Still waiting. Still calm. Another officer, younger, less hostile, approached with a tray. stale bread, lukewarm coffee. She ate slowly, drank the coffee, preserved her strength. Around her, other prisoners shouted, argued, begged for phone calls. She remained silent. 1:45 p.m. The door to the cell block opened. Captain Dodge walked in, alone. He stood outside her cell, arms crossed, that same smug smile on his face. "You've been here 9 hours, Queenie. How you holding up?" Stephanie looked at him. Said nothing. "Still think you're untouchable?" Dodge leaned closer to the bars. "You're not. You're just another criminal. And now everybody knows it." Stephanie stood, slowly, walked to the bars, faced him directly. "Captain William Dodge," she said quietly. "Badge number 2847. You've accepted $14,000 in bribes over the past 18 months. You've falsified arrest reports on at least 12 occasions. You've planted evidence, extorted business owners, and you've assaulted prisoners in custody." Dodge's smile faltered. "I have photographs," Stephanie continued, "bank records, witness statements, signed affidavits, and in approximately," she glanced at the clock on the wall, "43 minutes I'm going to make a phone call. One phone call, and your life is going to end." Dodge's face went pale, then red, angry. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" For a long moment they stared at each other through the bars. Then Dodge turned and walked away. Fast. 2:14 p.m. An officer appeared at the cell door. Younger. Uncomfortable. "Mississippi St. Clair. You're allowed one phone call." Stephanie nodded. "Thank you." She followed him to the desk phone in the processing area, picked up the receiver, and began to dismantle Captain William Dodge's entire life. 2:14 p.m. Stephanie St. Clair stood at the processing desk of the 135th Street precinct, holding a black rotary telephone. 3 officers watched her from across the room. One of them, Officer Rourke, was smirking, arms crossed, like he was watching a condemned woman make her last call home. "One call," he said. "Make it count, Queenie." Stephanie looked at him, then at the phone. Then she did something that made Rourke's smirk disappear. She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a chess player who'd been waiting 10 moves for her opponent to make the exact mistake she'd predicted. She dialed. "Call 1, the lawyer, 2:14 p.m. The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered, crisp and professional. "Leibovitz and Associates. Samuel Leibovitz, please. Tell him it's Stephanie St. Clair." A brief pause. 1 moment. The line clicked. 10 seconds passed. Then a man's voice came through, calm, educated, and instantly alert. "Stephanie. I've been waiting for your call." Samuel Leibovitz was 52 years old, one of the most respected defense attorneys in New York. He defended the Scottsboro Boys in Alabama, facing down racist mobs and corrupt judges. A black woman running an illegal gambling empire in Harlem? That didn't scare him. It intrigued him. "Samuel." Stephanie kept her voice steady, but loud enough for the officers across the room to hear every word. "I'm calling from the 135th Street precinct. I was arrested this morning at 4:22 a.m. It is now 2:14 p.m. I have not been formally charged. I have not been arraigned. I have not been allowed legal counsel until this moment. I have been held in a cell for 9 hours and 52 minutes. Across the room, Officer Rourke shifted uncomfortably. Captain Dodge had specifically ordered that she not be allowed a lawyer until after they'd had a chance to soften her up. But he'd underestimated 2 things: Stephanie's knowledge of constitutional law and how loudly she could speak. Leibovitz's tone sharpened instantly. "They've violated habeas corpus. That's a clear constitutional breach." "I'm aware." "Have they mistreated you?" "Handcuffs too tight. Denied food until noon. Denied access to counsel. Multiple witnesses to all of it, including other prisoners." Leibovitz was already writing. She could hear his pen scratching on paper through the phone line. "I'll file an emergency writ immediately. I can have you out within 4 hours. But Stephanie," his voice dropped lower, more personal, "is this just about getting released? Or is this the other thing?" Stephanie glanced at the officers. They were pretending not to listen, but every ear in the room was trained on her. "It's time, Samuel. The envelope I gave you on June 15th. I need you to activate it." Pause. Then Leibovitz said quietly, "All of it?" "All of it." "Understood. I'll contact Judge Lehman for the writ. I'll also make calls to the district attorney's office regarding Captain Dodge's irregularities. And I'll reach out to my press contacts. By tomorrow morning, Every judge, prosecutor, and journalist in Manhattan will know what kind of man Captain William Dodge really is. Not just Manhattan, Samuel. I want this in every newspaper. The Amsterdam News is already running the story tomorrow. I need the white papers to follow. The Times? And the Herald Tribune? And the Daily News? I want this on every front page in New York. Leibovitz let out a low whistle. You're not just defending yourself. You're going to war. Captain Dodge declared war when he put handcuffs on me in front of my neighbors. I'm simply responding. I'll make it happen. Stephanie, are you certain? Once this goes public, there's no walking it back. The NYPD will come after you. Dodge's allies will retaliate. Stephanie's voice was ice. Let them try. I've been ready for 18 months. Everything I have on Dodge, the photographs, the bank records, the witness statements, it's all documented, verified, and backed up in 3 separate locations. If anything happens to me, it all gets released automatically. You've thought of everything. I always do. All right. I'll have the writ filed within the hour. Sit tight. You'll be out before dark. Thank you, Samuel. She hung up. Officer Rourke was no longer smirking. He was staring at her like she just pulled a gun he didn't know she had. Call 2, the editor, 2:19 p.m. Stephanie didn't pause. She lifted the receiver again and dialed a second number. This one she'd memorized years ago, back when she'd first realized that information was more powerful than bullets. The phone rang 4 times. Then a gruff, impatient voice answered. Amsterdam News. Roberts. Wilfred. It's Stephanie. Wilfred Adolphus Roberts had been the editor of the New York Amsterdam News for 8 years. It was Harlem's most influential black newspaper, the voice of the community, the watchdog of police corruption, the platform for voices the white press ignored. And Stephanie St. Clair had been one of his most reliable sources since 1928. Roberts dropped his editing pencil. Stephanie. Where are you? 135th Street Precinct. Captain Dodge arrested me this morning. 4:22 a.m. Public arrest. Handcuffs in front of my entire neighborhood. Fabricated gambling charges. I've been held without counsel for almost 10 hours. Roberts grabbed a fresh notepad and started writing in shorthand. Do you need bail? I can make calls. I need you to run the story. Silence on the other end. Then Roberts said slowly, the Dodge story? Yes. You're sure? Stephanie, once I print this, it's out there. Dodge will know it came from you. The entire NYPD will know. They'll come after you harder. Wilfred. Stephanie's voice was calm. Final. I've been gathering evidence on Captain William Dodge for 2 years. Photographs of him meeting with mob enforcers. Bank records showing $14,000 in unexplained deposits over 18 months. Affidavits from 5 Harlem residents detailing false arrests, planted evidence, and extortion. Everything is verified. Everything is documented. And everything is in the envelope I gave you on June 18th. Roberts flipped through his desk drawer, found the sealed manila envelope she'd delivered weeks ago. He'd written the story already, had it typeset and ready to print, just waiting for her signal. The headline read, NYPD Captain Exposed, Corruption, Extortion, and False Arrests in Harlem's 135th Precinct. I have it right here, Roberts said. 3 full pages. Photographs included. It's the most damning police corruption story we've run in 5 years. Then run it. Tomorrow's edition. Front page. Above the fold. I want every newsstand in Harlem to have it by 6 a.m. It'll destroy him. That's the point. Roberts was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you know they'll call you a liar. A criminal trying to smear a good cop. They'll say you fabricated everything. Let them try. Every piece of evidence is real. Every photograph is dated and witnessed. Every bank record came from official sources. And every affidavit is signed and notarized. If Dodge wants to call me a liar in court, I welcome it. Discovery alone will bury him. Roberts laughed, a short, sharp bark of admiration. You've been planning this for months. Years. All right. I'll run it. But Stephanie, I'm also going to editorialize. I'm going to write about what it means that a black woman can build the case that white prosecutors won't. I'm going to make this bigger than Dodge. Good. Make it about every corrupt cop who thinks Harlem is his personal ATM. Make it about every officer who plants evidence and lies on arrest reports. Make it about justice. I will. Roberts paused. And Stephanie? For what it's worth, thank you. We've needed someone to stand up to these bastards for years. Harlem protects its own, Wilfred. Even from the people who are supposed to protect us. She hung up. Officer Rourke was whispering urgently to another cop now. They'd both heard enough to know this wasn't ending the way Captain Dodge had promised. Call 3, the Ghost, 2:23 p.m. Stephanie dialed the third number. This one was different. Unlisted. Known only to a handful of people in New York. The kind of number you only called when you needed power that didn't come from lawyers or newspapers. The phone rang once. A male voice answered. No greeting, no identification, just a single word. Yes. It's Stephanie. Pause. Then the voice, older, careful, belonging to someone who operated in shadows and moved politicians like chess pieces, said, I wondered when you'd call. Stephanie had never met this man face to face. She knew him only as Uncle, though he was no relation. He was a fixer. A man with connections in City Hall, the police commissioner's office, the mayor's inner circle, and places even darker. 3 years ago, Stephanie had saved him from a federal racketeering indictment by keeping certain documents buried, documents that would have destroyed him. He owed her one favor, one call, one intervention. This was that call. I need you to make something happen, Stephanie said. You're calling in the marker. Yes. Uncle was silent for 5 seconds. Thinking. Calculating cost. What do you need? Captain William Dodge. 135th Street Precinct. He arrested me this morning on fabricated charges. He's been extorting Harlem businesses for 2 years, taking bribes, falsifying reports. I have all the evidence. It's going public tomorrow. But I need pressure from above. The kind that makes police commissioners very nervous. You want me to call Valentine. Police Commissioner Louis J. Valentine. The top cop in New York City. Appointed by Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia in 1934 to clean up corruption. Publicly he was a reformer. Privately he knew when to look the other way. But he also knew when a cop became too much of a liability. Yes, Stephanie said. I want you to tell Valentine that Captain Dodge is about to become a front-page scandal. I want an internal investigation opened immediately. I want Dodge's personnel file reviewed. I want his bank records examined. I want him to know that someone above him is watching. And I want him to know it started the moment he put handcuffs on me. Uncle was quiet. Then he said, That's a significant ask. You owe me a significant debt. This clears it. We're done after this. Agreed. Fine. I'll make the call within the hour. Valentine will have a file on his desk by 5 p.m. But Stephanie, his voice hardened. You're playing a dangerous game. Cops protect their own. You humiliate one captain, you make an enemy of the entire department. Stephanie's voice was cold. Absolute. I've been making enemies since 1912. I'm still here. They're not. Uncle laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You're the most dangerous woman in New York. No, Stephanie said. I'm the most prepared woman in New York. There's a difference. She hung up. 2:27 p.m. 3 calls. 13 minutes total. Stephanie set the phone down gently, smoothed her skirt, and turned to walk back toward her holding cell. Officer Rourke stepped in front of her, face pale, hands trembling slightly. What the hell did you just do? Stephanie looked up at him. Her expression was calm. Unreadable. The same expression she'd worn when Captain Dodge arrested her 9 hours ago. I made 3 phone calls, Officer Rourke. Badge number 3192. You should ask your captain what happens next. Rourke stared at her. For the first time that day he looked afraid. Captain Dodge is going to... Captain Dodge, Stephanie interrupted quietly, has approximately 16 hours left in his career. I suggest you decide whether you want to go down with him. She walked past him back to her cell and sat down on the wooden bench. Outside, the August sun was beginning its slow descent toward evening. Inside, the trap Stephanie St. Clair had built for 8 weeks was closing. And Captain William Dodge still had no idea. 6:47 p.m., August 9, 1936. Captain William Dodge sat at his desk in the 135th Street Precinct, feet up, cigar in his mouth, feeling like a man who'd finally won. Stephanie St. Clair had been in a holding cell for 14 hours. No charges filed yet, he was dragging it out, making her sweat. By tomorrow morning he'd arraign her, parade her through court, make sure every newspaper got a photograph of the numbers Queen in handcuffs. He took a long drag on his cigar and smiled. The phone on his desk rang. He picked it up lazily. Dodge. Captain. Lieutenant Morrison. You need to come to the commissioner's office. Now. Dodge's feet came off the desk. Morrison's voice was tight. Nervous. What's this about? I don't know. But Commissioner Valentine wants to see you. Tonight. He said it's urgent. Dodge's stomach tightened. Police Commissioner Louis J. Valentine didn't call captains into his office at 7 p.m. on a Friday unless something was very wrong. Did he say why? No. Just said to bring your personnel file. Dodge hung up slowly, stared at the phone. Then he stood, grabbed his coat and walked out. He had no idea the walls were already closing in. 8:20 p.m., Dodge's apartment, Lenox Avenue. Dodge got home at 8:15 p.m. The meeting with Commissioner Valentine had been brief. Cold. Valentine had asked pointed questions about his arrest record, his bank accounts, and whether he'd ever accepted money from outside parties. Dodge had denied everything. But Valentine's eyes had been flat. Knowing. We'll be reviewing your file, Captain. Expect a call next week. That was it. No explanation. No reassurance. Just a polite threat wrapped in bureaucratic language. Dodge poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and sat in his living room trying to calm his nerves. The phone rang. Dodge. A voice he didn't recognize. Clip. Professional. Captain Dodge, this is Peter Hammond from the New York Amsterdam News. I'm calling for comment on a story we're running tomorrow about corruption in the 135th Street precinct. Dodge's hand tightened on the receiver. What story? A story detailing allegations that you've accepted bribes, falsified arrest reports, and extorted money from Harlem businesses. We have photographs, bank records, and witness statements. Would you like to respond? Dodge's blood went cold. That's a lie. Complete fabrication. If you print that, I'll sue your paper into the ground. So you deny meeting with Vincent Call on November 8, 1934, outside a warehouse on Lenox Avenue? Dodge froze. That meeting had been private. Secret. How the hell did they? No comment, he said and slammed the phone down. He stood there, breathing hard, trying to think. Stephanie St. Clair. It had to be her. But how? He'd arrested her. She was in a cell. She had no access to lawyers, no access to phones, no. Wait. She'd made a phone call. Around 2 p.m. He'd allowed it, 1 call, standard procedure. He hadn't thought anything of it. What had she done with that call? Dodge grabbed his coat and headed back to the precinct. 10:15 p.m., 135th Street Precinct. Dodge stormed into the precinct, found Officer Rourke at the front desk. The St. Clair woman. Who did she call? Rourke looked nervous. I don't know, sir. She made 3 calls actually. We thought she was only allowed 1, but she just kept dialing in. 3 calls? Who the hell authorized 3 calls? Nobody, sir. She just did it. And we didn't stop her because... Because what? Rourke swallowed. Because she was talking about constitutional violations. Habeas corpus. She was saying it loud enough for everyone to hear. We thought if we stopped her, it would look worse. Dodge felt his chest tighten. Who did she call? Her lawyer. Some newspaper. And someone else. We couldn't hear the third one clearly. Dodge walked to the holding cells. Stephanie was sitting on the bench, calm as ever, hands folded in her lap. She looked up when he approached. Captain Dodge, she said quietly. You look stressed. What did you do? I made 3 phone calls. You gave me permission. Who did you call? Stephanie tilted her head slightly. My lawyer. To inform him of your constitutional violations. A newspaper editor. To inform him of your criminal activity. And a friend. To inform him that you're about to become a liability. Dodge's jaw clenched. You think you're smart? You think you can threaten a police captain? I'm not threatening you, Captain. I'm educating you. Stephanie stood, walked to the bars. You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted to break me. You wanted Harlem to see the numbers queen in handcuffs. Congratulations. You succeeded. Dodge stared at her. But what you didn't realize, Stephanie continued, her voice soft and cold, is that I've been waiting for you to do exactly this. I've been hoping you'd arrest me. Because the moment you did, you gave me exactly what I needed. A public stage. And now, Captain Dodge, the entire city is going to see who you really are. Dodge felt something twist in his stomach. Fear. Real fear. You're bluffing. Am I? Stephanie smiled. Then, sure. Tomorrow morning, the Amsterdam News will run a front-page story about your corruption. Photographs. Bank records. Witness statements. By Monday, every white newspaper in New York will follow. Your personnel file is being reviewed by the commissioner as we speak. And by Tuesday, Internal Affairs will open a formal investigation. Dodge's hands were shaking now. And Captain? Stephanie leaned closer to the bars. If anything happens to me, If I fall, if I have an accident, if I don't walk out of this precinct alive, every file I have on you gets released automatically. To the FBI. To the district attorney. To every newspaper in America. Do you understand? Dodge said nothing. You can't win this, Stephanie said. You already lost. You just don't know it yet. She turned and walked back to her bench. Sat down. Folded her hands. Dodge stood there for a long moment, staring at her. Then he turned and walked away. 11:30 p.m., Dodge's apartment. Dodge couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through options. He could suppress the story. Threaten the newspaper. But the Amsterdam News wasn't afraid of the NYPD. They'd published corruption exposés before. He could destroy the evidence. But he didn't know where Stephanie kept it. And she'd said it was backed up in multiple locations. He could have her silenced. Permanently. But she'd anticipated that too. If anything happened to her, the evidence got released automatically. She'd thought of everything. At 1:45 a.m., Dodge got out of bed and opened his desk drawer. Inside was a ledger, a record of every bribe he'd taken, every payoff he'd made, every dirty deal he'd struck. He'd kept it as insurance, as leverage, as proof. Now it was evidence against him. He stared at it for a long time. Then he walked to his fireplace, struck a match, and burned it. It wouldn't matter. Stephanie had copies. She always had copies. 6 a.m., August 10, 1936. Dodge walked to the newsstand on the corner of Lenox Avenue and 135th Street. The morning edition of the New York Amsterdam News was already out. The headline was in bold, black letters 2 inches tall. NYPD Captain Exposed. Corruption, extortion, and false arrests in Harlem's 135th Precinct. Below it, a photograph. Captain William Dodge shaking hands with Vincent Call. The date stamped clear. November 8, 1934. Dodge bought a copy with trembling hands. Opened it. The article was 3 pages long. Detailed. Damning. Every bribe. Every false arrest. Every extorted business. Names. Dates. Amounts. And at the bottom, a quote from Stephanie St. Clair's lawyer, Samuel Leibovitz. Captain Dodge arrested my client on fabricated charges in an attempt to silence her. Instead, he has given her a platform to expose the systemic corruption that has plagued Harlem for years. Justice will be served. Dodge closed the newspaper. His career was over. 7:40 a.m., phone call. The phone rang. Dodge answered. Captain Dodge. Police Commissioner Valentine. I need you to report to headquarters immediately. Yes, sir. And Captain? Bring your badge and service weapon. The line went dead. 8:03 a.m., 135th Street Precinct. Captain William Dodge walked into the precinct for the last time. He didn't go to his office. He didn't speak to anyone. He walked to the front desk, where Lieutenant Morrison was standing with 3 other officers. Dodge reached into his coat, pulled out his badge, placed it on the desk. Then he unholstered his service revolver, laid it next to the badge and turned to leave. Captain? Morrison called after him. What do I tell the commissioner? Dodge stopped. Didn't turn around. Tell him I resign. He walked out. 8:47 a.m., Stephanie's release. 44 minutes later, Samuel Leibovitz walked into the 135th Street Precinct with an emergency writ from Judge Irving Lehman. My client, Stephanie St. Clair, is being released immediately. All charges dropped. Any officer who interferes will be held in contempt of court. Officer Rourke unlocked the holding cell. Stephanie walked out. Outside, the morning sun was bright and warm. A crowd had gathered. Neighbors from Edgecombe Avenue, runners from her numbers operation, shopkeepers from Lenox Avenue. When they saw her, they erupted in cheers. Stephanie stood on the precinct steps for a moment, looking at her community. Then she smiled. And walked home. 14 hours in a cell. 14 hours that destroyed Captain William Dodge. And proved once again that Stephanie St. Clair didn't need guns. She just needed patience. And a plan. August 10, 1936. 9:15 a.m. Stephanie St. Clair walked through the doors of 409 Edgecombe Avenue and climbed the stairs to her second-floor study. The same room where, 28 hours earlier, she'd been awakened by Captain Dodge's fist on her door. She removed her coat. Hung it carefully. Sat at her mahogany desk. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. The desk lamp. The 3 telephone lines. The locked drawer containing the 3 manila envelopes. She unlocked the drawer, pulled out the envelopes and set them aside. She wouldn't need them anymore. Captain William Dodge was finished. But the story was just beginning. By noon, Every newsstand in Harlem had sold out of the Amsterdam News. By 2 p.m., the New York Times and the Herald Tribune had picked up the story. By 5 p.m., radio stations were reporting it. NYPD captain resigns amid corruption scandal in Harlem. The white newspapers were careful with their language. They called it allegations. They said Dodge had stepped down rather than been forced out. They mentioned Stephanie St. Clair only in passing, a known Harlem numbers operator, as if her role was incidental. But Harlem knew the truth. Stephanie St. Clair had taken down a corrupt police captain using nothing but intelligence, patience, and evidence. And every cop in the 135th Street precinct knew it too. August 12, 1936, 2 days later. Officer Dennis Rourke walked into the precinct and handed in his resignation. No explanation. No drama. Just a letter on the lieutenant's desk and a quiet exit. He wasn't the only one. Within 2 weeks, 3 more officers from the 135th Street precinct quietly retired or requested transfers to other boroughs. All of them had been on Dodge's crew. All of them had taken money. And all of them had seen what happened when you underestimated Stephanie St. Clair. The message was clear. She has files on everyone. And she did. In her study, Stephanie maintained a filing cabinet with 4 drawers. Each one was alphabetized. Each one contained evidence, photographs, bank records, witness statements, on dozens of police officers, city officials, judges, and prosecutors. She called it her insurance policy. Harlem called it justice. August 20, 1936, 10 days later. Police Commissioner Louis J. Valentine sat in his office in downtown Manhattan, reviewing internal affairs reports. The Dodge case had opened a floodgate. Complaints about police corruption in Harlem had tripled in the past week. Residents who'd been too afraid to speak up before were now coming forward, emboldened by Stephanie St. Clair's victory. Valentine was a reformer, or at least he tried to be. He knew corruption was rampant in the NYPD. But he also knew that going after every dirty cop would destroy the department from the inside. So he made a choice. He ordered an internal review of the 135th Street precinct. 3 officers were quietly dismissed. 2 were demoted. The rest were reassigned to desk duty. And he issued a memo, unofficial, unwritten, but understood by every captain in the department. Leave Stephanie St. Clair alone. Not because she was untouchable, but because she was too dangerous to provoke. She had evidence. She had community support. And she had proven she was willing to go public. For the next 2 years, harassment of Stephanie's numbers operation dropped to almost nothing. The NYPD didn't stop being corrupt. They just stopped targeting her. September 1936, 1 month later. Stephanie sat in the back pew of Abyssinian Baptist Church as she did every Sunday. The pastor, Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Sr., was preaching about justice and righteousness. After the service, as the congregation filtered out, several people stopped to shake her hand. Mrs. Patterson from across the street. The Johnsons. The young couple from Martinique whose rent she'd paid. Thank you, Mississippi St. Clair, the young woman said quietly, for standing up. Stephanie nodded. We protect our own. Outside, the September sun was warm on Harlem streets. Children played stickball on Edgecombe Avenue. Men sat on stoops reading newspapers. Women carried groceries home from the market. Life went on. But something had shifted. Harlem had always known that Stephanie St. Clair was powerful. Now they knew she was untouchable. Not because she had guns. Not because she had money. But because she had something more dangerous. Proof. October 1936, the legend grows. The story of Captain Dodge's resignation spread beyond Harlem. It became legend. A cautionary tale. A blueprint. Other communities, black neighborhoods in Brooklyn, the Bronx, even Philadelphia, began documenting police corruption the way Stephanie had. Keeping records. Taking photographs. Gathering witness statements. They called it the St. Clair Method. Stephanie never took credit publicly. But privately she received letters from activists, community organizers, and lawyers asking for advice. She responded to every one. Because this was never just about her. It was about showing that power didn't have to come from violence. It could come from preparation. From intelligence. From refusing to bow. 1938, 2 years later. By 1938, Stephanie St. Clair's numbers empire was generating over $400,000 per month. She employed over 500 people. She owned property across Harlem, brownstones, storefronts, apartment buildings. And she continued to fund the community, churches, schools, families in need. But more importantly, she continued to gather evidence. Her filing cabinet grew. 4 drawers became 6. Then 8. Police officers, judges, prosecutors, politicians, mob bosses. Everyone who operated in Harlem's underworld knew Stephanie St. Clair was watching, and she was writing it all down. The Italian mafia tried to move into her territory twice more in the late 1930s. Both times they backed off, not because she threatened violence, but because she made it clear she had evidence that could destroy their political connections. Dutch Schultz was already dead by then, shot in a Newark tavern in 1935. Stephanie allegedly sent a telegram to his hospital bed before he died: "As ye sow, so shall ye reap." She never confirmed it, but Harlem believed it. 1969, the end. Stephanie St. Clair died on December 1, 1969, at the age of 83. She'd retired from the numbers racket years earlier, passing control to Bumpy Johnson, the young man she'd mentored in the 1930s. She spent her final years in her brownstone at 409 Edgecombe Avenue, reading, attending church, and quietly funding civil rights organizations. Her funeral was held at Abyssinian Baptist Church. Hundreds attended. There were no newspaper obituaries in the New York Times. No mention in the Herald Tribune. But in Harlem everyone knew. The Queen was gone. But her legacy remained. The lesson. Captain William Dodge's resignation wasn't just the end of one corrupt cop's career. It was a message. A message that echoed through every precinct in New York, through every corrupt system that thought power came from badges and guns and the ability to intimidate. The message was simple. Intelligence beats force. Preparation beats strength. Patience beats violence. And a black woman from Martinique who arrived in America with $10 and a dream, proved that the most dangerous weapon in the world isn't a gun. It's a filing cabinet full of truth. Stephanie St. Clair didn't just survive. She won. And Captain William Dodge? He spent the rest of his life knowing that a woman he tried to break had destroyed him with 3 phone calls and 14 hours of patience. That's the resignation that echoed. Not just through the NYPD. Through history.